Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's Cubiko session on maximizing chronic disease management service opportunities. Today, we hope to learn how to utilize Cubiko's service opportunities metrics to identify eligible patients, monitor the timing and billing of services, My Medicare eligibility, and bulk verification through Cubiko's Quick Check. Now, my name is Sydney Cruikshank and I'm from the PHN Education team. I'm joined today by Tiffany Dahl, Customer Support and Onboarding Manager at Cubiko. Before we begin today's session, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we live and work on. For myself on the Central Coast, that is Darkinjung country, and I'd also like to pay respect to all elders past, present, and emerging. Now, a little tidbit on a Savvy update. So that is our sustainability and viability initiative. Since launching in February of this year, we have had 60% of general practices across our region join Savvy and complete the viability assessment survey. The findings of this assessment afforded us valuable insights into the challenges facing our local general practices. One identified challenge was that some practices do not have the resources to invest in a health intelligence and analytics platform, or are otherwise constrained from adopting a proactive approach to business viability. By collaborating with Cubiko and the development of a tailored sustainability support platform, we have been able to provide practices the opportunity to see their business's data and use its insights in a meaningful way. We hope that access and use of the platform will enable the general practice business sector across our region to strengthen and thrive. And we thank you for joining us to achieve this. I know that Tiff is going to make our jobs a lot easier with the insights she'll demonstrate today, but I just wanted to mention that if you don't yet have access to Cubiko or the SSP, I encourage you to submit an EOI for a 12-month funded license as soon as possible. This is your last chance to make a submission for a license, so I highly encourage you to take the opportunity if you have not already done so. Now, a few housekeeping for today's session. It is being recorded and will be available for you to view in our education library in a few days' time, as well as a copy of the PowerPoint presentation slides. These are also available for you as an attachment in today's session that you can download and take away with you today. Now, as attendees, your camera and microphone are automatically disabled. However, if you have any additional questions, please pop these through in your question box and we will go through this at the end of the session. An evaluation will also come to you directly after this session. Now, your feedback is extremely important as it provides us the opportunity to provide future education. Now, it is my great pleasure to hand over to Tiffany Dahl.
Hello, thank you so much for that, Sydney. So yes, my name is Tiffany. I am the Customer Support and Onboarding Manager here at Cubiko, and I'll be running through this particular area with you today to have a look at maximising those CDM service opportunities in general practice with using Cubiko. Now, just a little bit of an overview for you with regards to Cubiko. So it is specifically designed to help you get the most out of your practice data. There's a lot of information that you have in your practice management software, and so Cubiko will bring that all together for you to give you some really quick reporting tools, customizable dashboards, really good overview on how you can visualize your data, and some really great collaboration tools, because we know that teams in general practice get the most out of their practice by working as a full team. You might have seen this before if you did come to the previous webinar that was hosted by my colleague Christina. So this is just talking about how you can improve some efficiencies in your practice as well, by looking at your workflows with your team, so using your practitioners, your reception team, your nursing team, and of course practice managers as well. So today, though, we are going through that maximising your CDM service opportunities in general practice. Couple of things that we're going to be looking at is that looking at those possible service opportunities that are coming through the door today, so for your patients that have appointments. We're also going to be looking at Quick Check, which is our integration for our practices that use best practice that can actually check your patient's eligibility with Medicare through Quick Check to see if they're actually eligible for those 721s, 723s and 732s. We're going to look further at your chronic disease management and looking at that proactive approach to identify those patients who are in your practice that may be due for their care plans or overdue, and also potentially due for a care plan, and that CDM fulfillment. So this is really looking at, of those patients who are eligible for chronic disease management plans or have been identified as potentially eligible, what percentage of those have you actually been able to provide a management plan for? We'll dive into those 10997s, and if you're not familiar with those, you will definitely be familiar with them by the end of this session. And then also having a look at the My Medicare CDM patient registration information that you can see in Cubiko as well. I've also popped through a bit of an overview of the CDM timeline here, and I know that on your screens you probably can see me and this slide here. You do have the option of being able to zoom your screen in as well using your settings in this particular webinar. So feel free to zoom in on these slides so you can see some more detail. This particular CDM timeline sits in part of one of our knowledge base article workflows, which I'll guide you to where you can see that if you are using Cubiko. But I do know that Sydney is going to be sending through a copy of that as well that you can have a look through. So it's a really, really great one to be able to provide to your team if they are new to general practice and chronic disease management. It's a really nice way of being able to see what patients are eligible and how those workflows work. But let's dive straight into our Cubiko dashboard here. So I'm just going to change my screen. Bear with me one moment. Okay, so if you do have access to Cubiko already and you have multiple screens, feel free to open Cubiko on a different screen and you can actually play along. But we're going to jump into our dashboard here, and we're going to start off with our chronic disease management area, looking at possible service opportunities that are coming through the practice doors today. So in Cubiko, you can see here that this is found in our clinic insights and today's clinic metrics. In here, you can then also see your possible service opportunities today. So what this one is actually showing us is a list of patients who have an appointment with us today that are coming in to see one of our practitioners that have been identified that they may be eligible for particular items. Now we've got a range of different items that we know that patients could be eligible for based on your practice billing history. So if they've had a chronic disease management plan in the past and that Medicare timeframe has come through so that they now may be eligible again, it's going to identify those patients in these lists. Where it has those potential new CDM plans, so they are potentially a new chronic disease management plan, that is because there is something on that patient's file that indicates they may be eligible for a chronic disease management plan. Now, with all of these identified items that we are looking at, it is going to be completely at the doctor's discretion as well to determine whether or not a chronic disease management plan is suitable. Those clinical decisions are always made by the practitioners at the end of the day, but these are really great tools to use to be able to identify those patients that are coming through. So in this screen, you can see that we've got this lovely summary tab here. You can look at each of these individually using these tabs, and we can have a squiz at those in just a moment. But on the side here, we can also see our filters. So here we're looking at those patients that have appointments today. So these are patients that have been booked in to see a practitioner at your practice, and it's going to identify the appointment date, which is today, the time that they are coming in, who the appointment is with, the appointment type, the patient's name, so it'll be their surname and first initial, so we don't pull all of the patient's data into Cubiko, and this list which will provide a summary of all the items that the patient may be eligible for. So you can see here for this patient that's sitting here, they've been identified, so this is my demo data, your data will have your patient details in there. They've been identified that they may be eligible for an item 721, and then a few other items as well, but we're focusing on those chronic disease management items at the moment. If they are eligible for a 721, as I said, it means that they've had a 721 in the past and it's been more than 12 months since they last had that billed. So if they had one billed a month ago, they're not going to appear on this list. You can filter to look further ahead as well. So if you are looking at this in the afternoon, for example, things got busy, you may not need to look at those patients that have already attended. So you can look at your appointments for tomorrow, in 2 days' time, in 3 days' time. You might even want to have a look at those appointments next week to see those patients that are coming in next week that have been identified, so that you can proactively reach out or set up your appointment books to see those patients there. One thing that I will always advise with practices that are looking at this is just when they are looking at the appointment type that a patient is coming in for, if they are already booked in for that chronic disease management item, so you've got them booked in for a care plan and it's identified that they're eligible, well done, you've actually been really proactive in getting those patients booking in. But the other thing to just be aware of is making sure you understand the restrictions on being able to co-bill for a standard appointment and a chronic disease management plan. So have a look at your process within the practice. If you speak with these patients as they're coming in to say, hey, you're due for your care plan, let's book you in on another day. Or if you are looking at doing those care plans on the day, just being aware of that restriction on being able to bill a standard item with a chronic disease management plan. And those decisions are made within the practice. I call it cannibalizing, so just be aware of not cannibalizing your billing opportunities if that is an option for you. So coming back up, you can look at this by practitioner. So you can select the particular practitioner you're wanting to have a look at by just going to select practitioner and clicking on their name. That will repopulate this data here to show just those services for the patients that are seeing that practitioner on the day. The other really nice thing that you will see in here on this particular summary tab is this open in a new window. This one will then create a pop-out, which will allow you to be able to move this and put it next to your appointment book in either Best Practice or Praxoft, to be able to highlight or put a note there for your doctors or your team to be aware this patient's coming through. It might be worth having a conversation about this particular item that they're eligible for, or another note. But this one is very, very handy to be able to jump through. And as you can see, I can move this around my screen and treat it like any browser so that I can pop it side by side. If you are wanting to look very specifically at the GPMPs, TCAs and reviews, you can jump into this tab and then that's going to populate these particular metrics here. So we can look at the patient who is eligible for a 721 and look at rebooking them in for that if it's suitable, or reaching out to them as they're coming in for their appointment. So this is those today's clinic metrics and really looking at those patients that are coming in to attend. You can change your billing frequency here. So you can change it to every 12 months, you can change it to every 18 months or 24 months, depending on what your practice process is with your chronic disease management workflows. So you can bill a 721 every 12 months, but your doctors may find it clinically more suitable to do every 18 months. Also with your 732s, by default, it's going to be looking at every 3 months because that's when you can do another billing for a review. But again, if your practice looks at these every 6 months because they feel that that's the clinical relevance for that, you can change that as well. You'll also see here where we have our nurse items. Now this is going to look at your 10997s. So those are your 5 nurse provided services that are billed under the practitioner's name, but patients who are on an existing care plan are eligible for 5 of these services across the calendar year, so from January to December. This is probably, especially at this time of year, one of my favourite metrics to look at, both in here and in our item optimization area, especially because we have Christmas coming up. Now, I always tell the story about my grandmother who was a diabetic. and she would overindulge at Christmas because she just didn't have um, the the support and the reminders about her dietary requirements and not to have so much chocolate Christmas pudding. So this is a really great one to start proactively reaching out to those patients, seeing these patients that are coming through, and if your nursing team have the opportunity to provide that 10997 service, to be able to pull them into their room to run through. It's actually going to also show you the number of 10997s that are remaining for this year. We're at the end of November, so if they have 5 in there, they've got 5 that they have not used through this calendar year. So it may be worthwhile trying to utilise those as well. Jumping back to my summary area here, I'm just going to also show you another really great component that we have, which leads me to talking about Quick Check. So Quick Check is a feature that is available for practices that are currently that are using best practice. Unfortunately, we don't have the Quick Check integration with our BP or ZMed customers at the moment. But quick check, I will just jump back to our today's clinic metrics and you can see it here. So quick check is looking at those patients. If we're looking at our quick check appointments, it's looking at those patients that have been identified as potentially eligible or eligible for those 721, 723s and 732s. And then allowing you to check these patients against Medicare to ensure that they haven't snuck off and had it elsewhere, and that it's actually going to, if you were to bill those items today, whether or not they are eligible for it. We have a little bit of a legend in here, which will show you what has been checked. If it's actually been checked and it's come back to say no, that patient's not eligible for that item, or if they may be eligible based on history because it hasn't been able to be checked. So when you are looking at this particular area, if it is bold, it said it will be identifying that they are eligible based on the Medicare and PRODA interaction. So this is going to reflect exactly what would be coming through, or the results that would be coming through if you were to do this within PRODA itself to do a check on this item. You can see this first one, I have actually completed this check. So for this pretend patient that I have here, they've been identified as that they may be eligible for these items based on their the practice data, their billing history. The bold item 721 and 723 has identified that Medicare has also said that they are eligible, so I can bill those items should they be provided. The other items that are here, they are not in bold, they're not crossed out either, and that's because we are only able to query the chronic disease management items and other health and mental health treatment plan items. These are still listed in here as practices sometimes like to still be able to see the full list of items that patients are potentially eligible for. But you can see on the side here, when they're not don't have any items that are eligible for quick check, it's not going to be showing. When you are in here and you want to do a check on these, so let's say I want to check on this particular patient who's been identified as eligible for a 721 and a 723, and we can go a few of them. I can then run that eligibility check. I still have to perform my declaration based on how I would have to do so in PRODA as well. So by selecting that box, we agree to the above declaration and then confirm. The reason it's called Quick Check is because if you can imagine doing this in PRODA, it would take quite a while, but those results for those patients have already come back. So this patient here, we can see it's come back, it's identified that that 721, the patient is not eligible for it. So even though it's been 12 months since they had that billed at my practice, they have had it billed somewhere else within that time frame, so they're not currently eligible for that 721. The 723 has come back that they are eligible for that item as well. And the same can be seen in with this one as well. It'll also then identify that they've been checked for today. So that's a really great way of going through that process and ensuring that those service opportunities that you've identified today are actually going to be eligible because you've cross-checked it with that Medicare eligibility as well. So jumping back home, that was looking at that today's clinic metrics and those possible service opportunities today. Now, if you are using Cubiko at the moment as well, you will have your suitability support platform here. Oh, sorry, sustainability support platform here. And so if you jump into this dashboard, straight away you'll also be able to access that particular area here. So if you forget how to navigate towards that clinic insights, today's clinic metrics, and finding those possible service opportunities today, you can always use your custom dashboard that's here and jump into this one here as well. It'll guide you straight there, which is really handy. So that's looking at those patients who are coming in today, but a lot of practices are looking at also being really proactive with their patients who are eligible for those chronic disease management items that may not have an appointment either. So for this, we're going to jump into our clinic optimization, and we're going to be looking at our item optimization here. So item optimization is looking at your entire patient cohort of who's potentially eligible and who's been identified as eligible, again, based on your practice data. So here we can see our 721s that are those patients that are eligible for a 721, and it's going to list all of your patients that have been identified. So they've had a 721 in the past, they don't have one, they haven't had one in the last 12 months, and so they are coming up as the patients who may be eligible for this item. You will see at the top of this list, you've got the date of an appointment if they do have an appointment. But if we scroll down, there's a lot of patients in my demo data that are eligible for this item. You can see here you also have your patients that have no booking either. So these are the ones that you might not get that opportunity when they're coming into the practice to have that conversation with them. So you can then proactively reach out to these patients. Again, you've got your filters on the side here. You can adjust your billing frequency if you are looking at changing that. So if you change this to 18 months, it's going to remove any patients that have had a 721 in the last 18 months. You can also have a look at patients with no appointment booked at all. So if you are getting your team using those today's clinic metrics to proactively speak to the patients that are attending appointments, you may wish to just be reaching out specifically to those patients that haven't booked in for an appointment for these particular items. You can filter this by the usual doctor as well. So if you've got a particular doctor that you are wanting to look at their patients in particular, you can do that. Just be aware that that requires you to have that completed on the patient's files as well. So they need to have a usual doctor listed on their file. If they don't have a usual doctor listed, they won't have anything there to filter on specifically as well. This little download button that you can see in the top right-hand corner of all of our tables, this is going to allow you to download these lists into a CSV. So if you do work with a third-party provider to send out SMSs or send out broadcasts, you can use that download button to get that CSV. The internal ID will be that first column, and that is what links the patient's contact information into those third-party providers as well. So that's handy to have there if that's the method that you choose to reach out proactively to patients with. Jumping back into my item optimization here, one thing that you will see is if you have a keen eye, you'll see that I've got this little reset button on my filters. Now filters, it's very important to remember that throughout Cubiko, the filters are sticky. So if I've set a filter in one particular spot and I flick over to other metrics, those filters will potentially stick. So you can click on that to just clear those filters, and it'll adjust this one to show you all of the data without filters. So that was your 721s, but you can also have a look at your 723s, your 731s, and also your 732s. So looking at those reviews for those patients as well. If we have a look at the top here, we have the fulfillment of CDM opportunity by doctor. This is a really great one to have a look at how your practitioners are going with actually completing those or having chronic disease management plans in place for patients that have been identified as potentially eligible for a chronic disease management plan. So what this is looking at, and this is it's a lovely complicated tooltip that I can hover over here, but basically what it is looking at is out of all of the patients who have either are on a chronic disease management plan or have been identified as a potential chronic disease management patient, it's looking at of those, how many actually have a plan in place. So let's say you have 50 patients with a plan in place, but you've got 100 patients that are either have a chronic disease or have been identified as potentially having a chronic disease to be able to look at that. That would be 50 over 100, and so you'd be looking at 50% fulfillment of that CDM opportunity. So that's a really good one to have a look at and see if there's any particular practitioners that you might want to speak to about whether their interests lie with chronic disease management and how you can support them in having these patients attended to as well. You will see that it's looking here at the last seen doctor or by the usual doctor. So again, remembering that usual doctor is going to be looking at the patient who is listed, the doctor who is listed as the usual doctor for a patient, and those patients will sit under that if you are looking at it from that perspective. If you change it to looking at the last seen doctor, and this is especially an especially good one to look at if you are then proactively reaching out to patients that are attending for appointments, because you should see this shift if you are engaging those patients that are potentially eligible and getting them onto those care plans as well. So I'm just jumping back again into my home screen, just reinforcing again, if you get a bit lost, don't stress too much, because again, you can see this in your dashboard in particular, and that will be the next one that you can look at. So these are looking at those potential new CDM patients that are identified in that item optimization, your 721s, 723s, and 732s. The other one that I really do also love is looking at this CDM opportunity, because it's actually going to show you the dollar value of that opportunity that's currently sitting in your practice. And this is only looking at those patients that are on a care plan or have been on a care plan, and they are due for that renewal. So you can see with my demo data here, I've for patients who have been identified as potentially eligible for their new 721, the dollar value of, if I was to have all of those patients come through, the dollar value of that based on what's happening in your practice at the moment. Now that is a lot of patients to see, so make sure that you're working with your team to look at your rostering and understanding, okay, where do you have capacity to be able to put these appointments in with both the doctors, and if you are using your nursing team for chronic disease management, making sure that they've also got that capacity to be looking at this as well. Okay, so the next area that we are going to look at is, as I said, my absolute favourite metric, especially at this time of year, and it's looking at those 10997 opportunities. So again, you can look at those in your clinic insights, that possible service opportunities today, and your nurse items. This is something that I would recommend having your nurses have at the front of their to-do list first thing in the morning, because it'll identify those patients that are coming in with an appointment that are on an existing care plan. So they do have that care plan in place, and so it's listed that they are eligible for these items, and they can see how many are left. In my practice, what I used to do was I would have my nurse looking at this to try and get those and book those patients in where they could in that day to have that conversation to document that service. And I very specifically say document that service. So make sure it's very clear what they've provided within that service to make sure it also meets that the MBS guidelines for a 10997. They can then also proactively make the next appointment for those patients as well. So if they are someone that's not necessarily adhering to, the management plan, maybe they struggle with motivation, maybe they have other reasons and needs to have that support, you can get your nursing team to proactively go, oh, well, I know that they've got five left. We're going to use one today. Let's do fortnightly until the end of the year to make sure that they are supported with this. They're not massive appointments with the nurse, and they don't need to see the doctor on that particular day if that's not required for this. So that item can be looked at and billed. The nice thing is if they book them in for an appointment on the side and they see them, and for some reason that billing doesn't actually progress to the front counter, there's those really great audit tools so you can identify where that billing might have been missed and look at that. So I believe that Christina probably went through that in your last webinar, but we've also got some really great guides on having a look at those historical 10997 opportunities that may have been missed. But coming back and again, going to this clinic optimization and your item optimization, if we scroll down here, we can see those item 10997s here for that proactive engagement, to having a look at those patients that, one, have appointments, but then also having a look at those patients that don't have an appointment booked. So your team don't have that opportunity to grab them when they're sitting in the waiting room, but you might want to proactively, again, reach out to these patients, especially before the end of the year, because there are 5 that are available in this calendar year. And once the calendar year is done, it resets for next year. So that's really handy. But those 5 that were available here, they are then they're then gone. So here, jumping through, you can use those filters again for the same approach, and you can see these are the patients who are listed for possible 10997s. You can download that list as well. It'll show you the number remaining and the completion rate there. Now, completion rate is a really good one to have a look at, and especially this time of year, if you're only just starting to use these metrics in your practice, you can have a look at that 10997 completion rate. And so this is looking at how many of the total available 10997s that you would have had available to bill across the year, what percentage of those were actually billed. So 100% means that every single patient that's on a care plan has had 5 10997 visits. So I worked in general practice. I know sometimes it's quite challenging to have patients return to discuss these. So you might want to set a goal with your team to say, hey, this is what we were at the end of this year. So we're at 10%. Next year, what's our goal going to be? What are we going to be working towards? What do we want it to look like? So you might say, well, we want at least every patient on a care plan to have had 3 of these visits with our nurses. So you might be looking at having a 60% completion rate, which would be a really nice, a really lofty goal, but something that your team can definitely take ownership and be proud of. I'm a big advocate for the work that nurses do in general practice, and this is definitely something where they can contribute not only in the amazing way that they do from a clinical sense, but from that financial side of things, with being able to provide this service that can bill to Medicare as well. Now, before I jump into the last little bit about My Medicare, I am just going to highlight that 10997, that historical one that was discussed in the previous webinar with my colleague Christina. But in this, where you're looking at your billing optimization and that historical opportunities, in here, you can see that these are where the patient has had an appointment with the nurse. So in that nursing column, they may or may not have had a 10997 service provided, but they've been identified that they were eligible for it at that time. So if you're using these metrics, your patients are coming through, they're having those appointments with the nurses, but there's something that gets lost in the translation to actually billing that item, you've got a really great opportunity to be able to look back over the last month, over the last 2 months, up to 2 years. So you can see if it was provided, if it was correctly documented in the patient's file, can you go and retrospectively bill that particular item for that patient as well. So that's a really great one to have a look at, and it's just a really nice reassurance that you aren't going to miss any of those opportunities that might have come through, and your team are doing a great job. But again, that item number wasn't translated to the billing screen for your reception team. Now, finally, with our chronic disease management patients, we know that we're all looking at My Medicare in a lot of detail, now. So there is the My Medicare area where you can have a look at those patients to see who is registered with My Medicare and who you might actually need to start reaching out to have them registered with your practice and ensure that those patients are coming through to the practice. So in here you can see the My Medicare tab with here. If you are using best practice, you will have the option to upload your PROTA CSVs to update your practice on the My Medicare registration area. But if you are using Medical Director and Praxsoft, you will still be able to see your My Medicare registered patients based on the tick that you've added into your patient demographic details in there as well. So they will be uploaded into Cubiko to identify if those patients have been registered. So in here you can look at all of your patients that are sitting here, but we're going to specifically be looking at our cohort analysis. And so we're going to want to have a look at the percentage of My Medicare CDM registered patients. So here you can see your eligible CDM patients. So these are your patients who are chronic disease management patients, and the number that you've actually registered with My Medicare for at your practice. You can jump into this one here, and it's going to give you 2 tabs. So you can see your registered and eligible CDM patients. So this one is looking at patients who they're eligible to be My Medicare registered, and it's going to show you that list if they are registered or they're not registered. So then you can use these filters to identify those patients that you want to register or reach out to make sure that they are registered at your practice. On the side here, again, you can see patients with appointments. So if you're wanting to see those patients that are coming through who are, you are needing to, give them a tablet to do their registration or give them a form to do their registration, you can really proactively speak to those patients when they're attending. In here, you can select your eligible but not registered. So these are the patients that, yes, they've been identified that they're eligible for My Medicare, they're not yet registered, but they are our chronic disease management patients, so we are wanting to engage with them to get them to come back as well. We do have the list of ineligible CDM patients as well in here. So these are the patients that, yes, they've had a care plan at the practice in the past, but they haven't attended the practice as often as what is required for those face-to-face visits to make them My Medicare eligible as well. So you can have a look at this one as well if you are going, look, let's get those patients back, let's bring them back in. So you can, again, proactively reach out to those patients. You can download that that CSV to contact them also. But if we are looking at those registered and eligible patients, again, it'll say if they've got a booking, but if they don't have an appointment booked, and I often like to look at these because you will be able to capture a lot of your patients that do have a booking if your team are working together to have those conversations when they're coming through. But if they don't have an appointment booked, it might be wise to jump in here. You can have a look at eligible but not registered patients that don't have an appointment booked. Look at exporting that CSV and reaching out to those patients to say, hey, you're one of our patients. We've noticed we don't have you registered with My Medicare for our practice, and so start really engaging those patients as well to come through. Now I'm just going to reset all of my filters because, as I said, they are a little bit sticky. So if we jump into other metrics, they will still be on. So coming back into our dashboard, so we have gone through those opportunities today that are coming through. That quick check, which is available if you are using best practice to check the eligibility against Medicare for those chronic disease management items. Our proactive reach outs to our patients who are on care plans, so you can reach out to those there, and those 10997 opportunities that are sitting in your practice at the moment as well. When you're looking at your possible service opportunities today and looking at those today's clinic metrics, as I mentioned with your My Medicare eligible patients, we do also have this in that today's clinic metrics area. So if you are using your reception team to proactively look at these things as well, this is a really great one to have a look at those patients that are coming in who aren't registered, and they can also use this list to have that conversation. I know that often if I tried to reach out to a patient via text or via letter or via phone, they weren't interested in talking to me, but having a chat to Mrs. Jones when she walked into the practice to run through those different things has always worked really, really nicely with the practice. So including your whole team to be looking at these ones is a really great one to look at. I will almost changed my screens back, but I just wanted to highlight again this need help button for you, which is also a really handy one whenever you're looking at anything in Cubiko. And if you're searching for anything in particular, you can pop into here. So let's say CDM, we're looking at this specifically. So this one, chronic disease management items and workflow, is this article that is a really, really handy one, which will show about that opportunistic patient engagement. So looking at those patients that are coming through, the opportunity is there to engage with them, and that proactive patient engagement. So that's looking at those patients that may not have an appointment that you might want to reach out to. We've got the workflow, which was that screen that I showed you before, which I'll jump back into in just a moment. But this is also a really nice one for your team to be able to have a look at and say you can identify when you can bill things across through that chronic disease management process if you were to bill absolutely everything and have your patients really engaged in that journey. There's also other items, other articles in here where you can see what are items that are included in your chronic disease management. And this one I love, it just highlights that it does also include if you are doing things via video or via phone. So those telehealth appointments as well, because we know that the landscape of general practice has changed since telehealth was introduced and stayed, which was really great. So I'll just jump back out to my other one. We've dived into our Cubiko dashboard. This is that workflow which I highlighted before, which is in that help center. But hopefully that gave you a bit of an overview as to how you can use Cubiko to for your chronic disease management workflows and getting your patients back in and really engaged with those items. So I think I have a little bit of time now for any questions, and I think Sydney will probably be popping back to run through those questions. But I know a lot of the time practices are really focused, and then they'll need a second to ask a few questions. But if there are any, feel free to shoot them at me straight away.
Perfect. Now I'll go through what's come through, and apologies if we have covered it, but I'll just get you to reiterate it if that's okay, Tiff. So first one, just
Absolutely.
wondering if the 721/723 eligibility is linked to Medicare or only looking at our PMS billing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yep, so when you are looking at those patients that have been identified as eligible for a 721 or a 723, that initial looking at them in those metrics, it is using your practice data. So let's say the patient had a 721 billed November last year, and that 12 months has come around. That's what's identifying it there. And then if you use Quick Check will be what you can check against Medicare, because we can't see if it's been billed at a different practice. You have to run that check to ensure that it hasn't been billed at Medicare as well.
Perfect. Next one, do we know when Quick Check will be available for best practice?
That is a very, very good question. We don't. It's based on the integration that we have, but we have had feedback that people would love to be able to have Quick Check with medical director. So I'll add additional feedback to say that it's definitely something that people are looking to have.
Amazing. Next one, can you quick check the item optimization list for patients' eligibility for CDM?
So you can't quick check the item optimization list. However, let's just jump back onto the screen here. So if you do have quick check, there's two with the quick check tab here, there's two areas. So one is that appointment. So this is looking at those patients that do have an appointment booked in that we've identified based on those other items. We do have the quick check patient search as well. So let's say you do have a patient that you've identified that they may be eligible for their 721. You can do a search on them in this area as well. So similar to how you would do a search in Proda, but then you don't have to do all the rigmarole of logging into Proda and those. So that's a really great one to be able to look for the patient ones. But at the moment, no. If in that item optimization area, we don't have that quick check looking at all of those. We do have the option to check lots and lots of patients. So if you were to select 1,700 patients potentially eligible for a 721, it would take a very long time for it to run all of those checks. But they're the two options that you have with checking quick check.
Perfect. Now, I did have one saying, how do you do your 12-month license? How do we apply for it? I'm not sure if you know that one, Tiff. I'm not on the Savvy team, so I'm not positive. So I
Yeah.
have just put in the chat for everyone the link to the Savvy PHN landing page that does have Albul, who's the project lead, has her email and phone number to ask questions, but I'll see if you can answer that one first, Tiff.
Yeah, so again, I think Christina is the lovely person in our team that looks after this. It is with the project and getting that license. I believe there is that EOI and a form that you complete with the PHN. Once that's been completed, things will come through with your details so that we can get you set up for that. But as Sydney said, probably best to reach out to the team at the PHN for the details on how you can submit that EOI and that and the forms for that.
I will try and also chase it up with Al. And in the follow up email, I will try and attach, if there is an actual link to the AOI, I'll try and put that in the follow up thanking email for everyone today. And then, Tiff, do you want to let them know what link that I've also put in there, what that was, so that they know what's coming?
So the link that if it's the link to the knowledge base article about chronic disease management, so that that article which goes through, how to engage your patients using Cubiko. But as I said, in that article, it's also got this timeline in it. So if you aren't currently using Cubiko, or you're just about to start, you can still familiarize yourself with that chronic disease management timeline from that workflow. It's got some really good tips on how to engage your patients and how to use Cubiko for those as well. So that opportunistic and that proactive engagement.
Perfect. Well, I think that is it for today, unless anyone has anything else. Just a reminder that we will have the evaluation coming through to you at the end. And again, you will get the follow-up email with the link that will have the PDF, the recording from today, and then the resources that Tiff has discussed. We will end there then. And thank you again, Tiff,
Beautiful.
for your time and all the
Yeah.
information that you've provided. It's always a pleasure to work with Cubico.
Yep, wonderful. Thank you. So yes, everyone, enjoy the lead up to the silly season, and yeah, hopefully you get all those 10997s in there so that everyone is stays safe and stays healthy.
Thanks, Tiff. Have a good one.
Wonderful. Thanks, guys.
Yes.
Okay, bye.
Bye.